What is a ghost? Most would say that it is a spirit, or someone's spirit, I believe. Visitation of a lost loved one is something only a few can claim has happened to them, and when it does, they almost never refer to that visitation as a ghost or a haunting. So what is a ghost exactly? Is it the residual energy from a person's life force after they pass? A lost soul? A disembodied consciousness? I believe that it is a personal perspective, because what one person would view as a lost loved one, another would see as nothing more than a ghost.
There have been reports of strange creatures in the area.
Witnesses say they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
What is that?
Welcome, beloved fofers, doubters, naysayers, non-believers, and skeptics. Welcome to Paranormal Fable or Fact. I am Victor Trevino, joined by my co-host and beautiful wife, Tammy.
We are your humble guides to tales of alleged hoaxes, unbelievable stories, and the overall strange.
Sweet. Perfect as usual, baby.
Thank you.
So we gotta mention the email
Yes.
and the Facebook.
Yes.
And our email is pfableorfact@proton.me, and it will be in the show notes. And I have to mention, we got a contentious email. They disagreed with our conclusion because, according to them, there was definitely a dorsal fin, and it was just a new species of basking shark. And what was our problem in just admitting that? Well, again, you're more than welcome, more than entitled to your own opinion. So I even put on an email, I'm not trying to argue with you, but if there is a photo, I would love to see it, because I would. That'd be awesome. I have no problems correcting myself if there was a dorsal fin on that, Yuri Maru carcass. That would be awesome.
Right. And like we said before, I've listened to the podcast where I've changed my conclusion after listening to our podcast. So it doesn't mean it's my final conclusion, but thank you for the input. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And the other point about the it being just a new species of basking shark, and why couldn't we just accept that? I would totally accept that. If that was the conclusion, we think we've discovered a brand new species of basking shark, that would have been much better than, it most likely was a basking shark. Let's hide all the samples. Let's not talk to the people on the short ship. But it was most likely a basking shark. That was a lame explanation. Discovering possibly a new species of basking shark was much better. There's like fireworks going off and people all celebrating, you know what I mean? That would have been a much better explanation. So I totally agree with them on that. But my only question is, if it was just a new species of basking shark, why didn't they just come out and say that? It would have been much better than most likely a basking shark. But anyway, go ahead.
It would have been much easier, and we probably wouldn't have done the show.
Maybe. Especially if there was actually a photo of a dorsal fin, and then they already admitted that it was possibly a new species. Heck yeah, I would have been like, we probably wouldn't have done the show. You're absolutely right. So let's get on with the rules.
Okay.
Rule number 1. We will never purposefully mislead or report false information.
Rule number 2. We are not professional podcasters, broadcasters, or audio editors, so mistakes will happen.
Rule number 3. Everyone is entitled to what they believe, what they want. Rule number 3. Everyone is entitled to believe what they want and entitled to their own opinions. That includes us.
Rule number 4. We are offering information and insight as food for thought, not persuasion.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much the biggest one. So let's get on to the gist, shall we?
Oh, I mention something though?
Oh, go ahead.
So I know it was a couple shows ago, but I just wanted to, I was listening to the Halloween show, and I thought it was really neat that we got our parents to input that about the stories, because I think that'll be really nice for our family. So just to bring that up is that if you yourself don't have any stories, but you have those stories that your grandparents told, or your uncles or aunts or your parents, definitely look into seeing if you want us to bring those stories up, because that's fun.
Are you talking about it being immortalized?
Yeah, I think it's neat. And then
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Because
I didn't think about
people
that.
tell stories and it goes generation to generation, and that's exactly what happened. You know, and I think that's just neat, because now our grandchildren and our great grandchildren will hear that. you know? And that's it. That's just cool to me, and it's probably just my genealogy side. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that is a good point, babe. That's a really good point.
So
this show, we're going to talk about, it's basically a ghost story show, so there's not going to be any red flags or any inarguable truths, but it's not really a story time because they're actual cases.
okay,
And the reason I wanted to do them is because these particular cases are documented. And I thought that was fascinating. By legal documents like court records, police reports, coroner's reports, etc., etc. And I think that's just fascinating.
yeah,
And we're gonna be talking about 3 stories. First one is the Greenbrier. The Greenbrier Ghost. I always say that. I always say Greenbrier. I don't know why. The Greenbrier Ghost, the murder of Teresita Basa, and the Red Barn murder. Normally, we don't have to do a disclaimer, but in this one, I think we should, baby. Honestly, because we're aware that these stories involve actual people, and there might be surviving family members, stuff like that, and people lost their lives.
Correct.
People were murdered. These are actual murder cases, stuff like this. So we might be joking and laughing while we're doing the show, but in no way are we meaning that to be disrespectful to the dead or disrespectful to any surviving family members. That's the last thing we want to do. If we are joking and stuff, we're just trying to keep the show lighthearted. That's all. We're not trying to be disrespectful. I just thought we needed to put that out there. You know what I mean?
I agree.
But I think we're very respectful of the dead, baby, don't you?
Yes,
I think we are.
yeah, we are.
So the first story we're going to talk about is the Greenbrier Ghost, and this occurred in 1897, baby, in Greenbrier County, West Virginia, and it involved Zona Heaster. So a strapping young lad, the gist of the story is this strapping young lad named Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe, heretofore referred to as Edward Shoe, because that's what he was going by at the time. So Edward Shoe, I guess he moved into this area from out of another county or possibly even another state. I'm not sure, but... And all the ladies in the area were all, all the eligible bachelorettes were all excited about this guy moving there because he's a new blacksmith, for the locals. Good-looking guy, tall, by all accounts, very handsome. So Zona, just like every other eligible girl, was entranced by him. Well, Zona's mother, Mary, I guess met him several times and wasn't very impressed with him. So she basically told Zona, hey, don't waste your time on that guy. He's trouble, or whatever.
Yeah.
But of course, like every young girl rebelling against the parents or whatever, Zona basically eloped with Edward Shoe, and they moved about 20 miles down the road from her mother's house. So basically what happened was Edward Shoe was at work, working as a blacksmith, and sent one of the young men that worked there, I think it was a boy actually, to go check on his wife to see if his wife was ready for him to come home for lunch. Like some people used to do back then. You get your lunch break, you go home, eat, and come back, right?
Yeah.
So the kid goes to his house and finds Zona lying at the bottom of the stairs, not moving. So she must have looked horrible, because the kid, instead of running and getting the police or something like that, he ran right to the doctor, the coroner, the medical examiner, and tried to get a hold of him. Basically got a hold of the coroner, and the county coroner, his name was Dr. Knapp. He must have been really busy, because it took him over an hour to get back to the house.
Oh, wow.
By the time they arrived at the home, Edward Shue had already come home, moved Zona's body from the bottom of the stairs to their upstairs bedroom, had propped her up in their bed, and dressed her in one of her better dresses with a very high collar neck, and put a veil over her head, which was kind of odd. And he's just weeping uncontrollably, just devastated that his wife...
Edward was,
yes. Devastated that his wife was dead. Basically didn't want the coroner to come near the body. He did, the medical exam, Dr. Knapp did check her pulse and did confirm, probably on her wrist, that she was gone, that she had passed away. And that was basically that. They said it was an accidental death having something to do with childbirth, because I guess Edward painted this elaborate tale of her being sick because she had recently discovered she was pregnant and possibly passed out and fell down the stairs or whatever, whatever excuse he gave the coroner, and that was that. The funeral went as normal. Zona was buried, and everybody was moving on. A month later, her mother, Mary, gets a visitation from her daughter, and that's exactly how she put it. It was a visitation. Apparently, Zona appeared to her with this glow around her, kind of transparent, basically her ghost, her spirit, and was telling her mother that Edward Shue was very cruel and very abusive to her, and that she had been murdered. So as you can imagine, Mary's very upset, doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't do anything about it. Zona came back and visited Mary 4 times, a total of 4 times, yes, before Mary acted upon these visitations. So on the last occasion, the last visitation, I'm not even sure about that, but basically the whole thing of it was she was saying that he had come home the night before and she hadn't prepared him meat. So he basically strangled her, and he strangled her so hard that, quote, her throat had been squeezed off at the first joint. So Mary finally says, all right, enough's enough. She goes to the authorities, and it was some prosecutor named, I don't even think I wrote down his name. It doesn't matter. But basically she goes to the authorities and reports this and tells them, my daughter said she was strangled and that her throat was squeezed off at the first joint. So, and the skeptics said that most likely the exhumation, because they wound up exhuming Zona's body, and a lot of skeptics like to say, well, that was most likely because people were already suspicious, so that they were kind of spreading little rumors around that, maybe she was murdered or whatever. I completely reject that, though, because, baby, when someone dies unnaturally, or dies really young, or takes their own life, how many family members don't start rumoring that there was foul play? Right?
Right.
It happens all the time. So a police officer or a prosecutor, they would have ignored all that. The rumors are rumors,
Right.
Because some family members have a hard time accepting death in their family, particularly if the person's very young. Zona was very young when she passed away. She was very healthy. So, of course, people would have been like, well, that's odd that she would just die from childbirth. So, of course, they were questioning it, and there was rumors going around and stuff, but the police wouldn't have reacted to that. I believe what caused the police to react is because Mary was so Mary was so specific. When you talk about being strangled and that her neck had been dislocated, that being that specific, I think that's what prompted the prosecutor to get in touch with Dr. Knapp and ask him, hey, did anything odd happen when you found the body?
Right.
So Dr. Knapp, of course, starts talking about how Edward had dressed her, covered up her neck with that high-collared, that he had put a veil over her head so that he couldn't examine her face or her neck.
Yeah.
Didn't let him really get close to the body. The only thing he could reach is her wrist to check her pulse. So now it's such that son of suspicious.
Suspicious. Suspect, suspicious, suspicious.
You couldn't say it either. Suspicious. So now everything's starting to sound suspicious.
Right.
So that's why they exhumed her. And as they start, Dr. Knapp starts doing the medical examination. That's when they find out that indeed she was strangled. There were hand prints on her throat, bruising on her throat.
Yeah.
And that her neck had been dislocated. Her head had basically been dislocated from her neck after the first vertebrae, between the first and second vertebrae.
Wow.
Just as Mary had described. So, of course, Edward Shue was arrested, and they start really looking into this clown,
Yeah.
They really start looking into his background, and they found out that he had been married twice before, unbeknownst to everybody in the area. And that when they interviewed his first wife, she said he was a very abusive, very angry, had a very horrible temper, and that he was extremely brutal to her. So they were like, oh, wow, that's really good evidence, right?
Yeah.
And that his second wife mysteriously died. Now that is enough to start sending up some red flags, right?
Right.
The alarm bells going
Yeah.
off and stuff. Because apparently he had been repairing his roof, and this is his second wife. He had been repairing the chimney or something on the roof, and a brick accidentally fell off the roof and killed his second wife in this bizarre accident.
He probably hit her with it.
Yeah. Very suspicious death.
Yeah.
So now they're getting all this evidence now. They're getting all this evidence. I believe what happened, because, again, the skeptics were saying, well, this case would have been prosecuted regardless of whether Mary had come forward with her ghost story or not. I dispute that, because I think that what Mary did is she was describing what had happened. And by her description of him attacking her daughter, the police officer was able to put together the crime scene. Because remember, nobody saw the crime scene. By the time the medical examiner had got there to the house, Edward Shue had already moved her body.
Except the boy.
Except that young boy. Mm-hmm. Right. He's the only one that saw her laying at the bottom of the stairs, but even that could have been staged. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there were probably little things that Mary was saying that were specific, because that's everything that I kept seeing was the specificity of what she was saying is what prompted the police officers to dig deeper.
Yeah.
Because so she must have mentioned things, and they were looking around the house going, oh, how would she know about that? How would she know about this? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why they exhumed her. So this idea that had Mary not come forward, that they just would have prosecuted him anyway, I think that's nonsense.
I think you might be onto something that he staged her falling down the stairs, because he probably killed her the day before or something, and then went to work and then had the boy go out to the house instead of him, because then it doesn't land on him.
Right.
And then the boy sees her medically, oh my gosh, let me go get the doctor, instead of the police.
Right.
Yeah.
And he would not be the last person to see. Well, actually, he still was the last person to see her alive, but he wasn't the one that discovered her body.
Discovered her, yeah.
So it's all very
interesting.
And that's what I'm saying. So here's the fascinating part of this case, as though it's not fascinating enough. But basically, Mary was called to the witness stand.
All rise.
Now, any lawyer worth their salt would say, well, how? Because it's hearsay, 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 all the way down the road. Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. You can't present evidence from a third party. Yeah. Well, she told me this, or he told me that.
Yeah, why would the prosecutors do that?
The prosecution didn't. The defense lawyer did.
Oh, really? Wow.
Completely blows my mind.
That's odd.
Completely blows my mind, baby, because I can't for the life of me think why the defense lawyer would think by bringing Mary up on the stand, somehow he'd be able to clear Edward Shue of anything. I mean, he grilled her, he kept questioning her, he kept trying to get her to trip up, and Mary was true to her story. She was, they said, I even heard descriptions of her being a rock star witness, that she was a solid witness because she was just adamant. No, my daughter said this, my daughter said that. This is how she appeared. This is what she said. And she just boom, boom, boom right down the row, and he could not break her.
Wow.
The defense. And this is the most interesting. This whole thing is the most interesting part. But The judge couldn't instruct the jury to disregard her testimony because it was the defense that had called her to the witness stand. See, the prosecutors never made reference to it.
So they already signed up the deal. They already made his client. He already signed the deal for his client to go to jail.
I guess because
Yeah.
and then when you really think about it, and I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lawyer way of thinking. I don't understand what his strategy was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because even if he had proven that she was completely lying, completely fabricated all the dreams and Mary's visitations and all this, how would that have helped Edward? Mary wasn't the one that found the evidence. The medical examiner was.
Right.
Mary wasn't the one that found the crime scene suspicious. The police were.
Yeah.
Mary wasn't the one that found out that he had been married twice before, that he had interviewed the first wife, had interviewed the second wife.
The police did.
The police did. So
Yeah.
I don't understand what the defense lawyer was thinking doing that. But that's why it is a documented case of someone testifying in court, in U.S. court, about a ghostly visitation. And I think that's
Wow.
just fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Well, of course, he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And he only served like 3 years, Edward Shue. He only served like 3 years in prison, and he died in prison from some strange virus or something.
Wow.
But yeah, that's basically the story of the Greenbrier Ghost.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and you know, I read some of the skeptical points of view on it, saying that Mary hated Edward Shue and suspected him so much of having something to do with her daughter's death that she just made all of it up. Well, if that's the case, how? Oh, how? Because again, you're welcome to have your own opinion, but how could she know the specifics of her daughter not only being strangled, baby? You could, if that's the case, if she just said, oh, she was choked, okay, you could
Yeah.
get lucky.
Yeah.
But the specificity of her throat being squeezed off at the first joint,
Yeah.
that her head had been dislocated from her neck between the first and second vertebrae,
Yeah.
how could she possibly know that?
I don't know.
If she just made it up,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Good story.
yeah, very, very interesting. So we're going to be moving on to the next story, and this one's crazy too. This one's very interesting to me. The murder of Teresita Basa, and this occurred in 1977 in Chicago, Illinois. I was very surprised to find out that this specific case had been covered by one of my all-time favorite shows, Unsolved Mysteries. I didn't know that until after I started doing my cursory research into it. But basically what happened is you had this respiratory therapist that worked in this hospital in Chicago, and very unassuming, very quiet, everybody liked her. Last person anybody would think would be the victim of a violent crime. But she was murdered, basically, Teresita Basa. The ones that were called was the fire department because there was a fire in her apartment. So when the firemen kick the door in, go in there, they start putting out the fire, they find a burning mattress, and after they extinguish the flames, they remove the mattress, and underneath they found Teresita's corpse with a knife sticking out of her chest. Obviously not natural causes.
Right.
So they call in the police. The police start coming in doing investigations. They had almost no evidence of who had committed the crime, except that they had found a note that said, "Get tickets for AS." That's pretty much the only thing that they found that they could see didn't seem part of her normal apartment, something that was new.
Yeah.
Was this note, and that's it. That's all they had to go on. So they were basically running into kind of a cold case.
Right. Like,
So-
who's AS?
Yeah, who's AS, who murdered her, so they're, looking into any enemies that she had, all this kind of stuff. They were coming up with Zippo. So I think 3 or 4 months went by, and here comes this coworker from the hospital, not necessarily a friend of Teresita, I don't think. You know how massive hospitals, you could work there for years, and you don't know certain people that you work with. So I think Remy Chua knew who Teresita was, but wasn't close to her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They weren't close friends.
Yeah.
But Teresita was from the Philippines, and so was Remy, which was, I don't know if that's some kind of connection, maybe because she could speak to her in their native language, maybe.
Maybe.
But Remy and her husband, Joe Chua, approached the police officers and started telling them this outlandish story about how Remy had been being visited by Teresita in her dreams. And Teresita was saying, I was murdered by this orderly that works in the hospital with us. You have to go to the police. So, of course, she's talking to her husband about this, Joe, and Joe's just like, well, I don't know what to do, you know?
Yeah.
I guess they were very unassuming, too, so they just both really didn't think anything about it. Except, I guess Remy was taking a nap one day, and she started speaking to Joe in this strange voice. A voice that Joe didn't recognize, and she's telling Joe, hey, my name is Teresita Basa, I was murdered, you need to go to the police. And it was this orderly that worked in the hospital with both of them, both Remy and Teresita, named Alan Showery, that had murdered her. So again, Joe was like, man, that's really weird, but didn't do anything about it. Until it happened again. Again, Remy, his wife, begins talking to him in a strange voice, angry with him. Hey, why didn't you go to the cops?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the crazy thing was Joe Chua's like, well, I don't have any evidence. What do you want me to do? So he's kind of arguing
Yeah.
with his possessed wife.
Right.
And he's like, I don't have any evidence. How do you expect me to just start accusing this guy at the hospital, you know, with no evidence? And Teresita tells him, he gave my jewelry to his girlfriend. So now, armed with this evidence, they go to the police. That's why they decided to go to the police. The police start asking questions about this Alan Showery. And sure enough, when they started asking around, everyone that worked around him knew that he was going over to her house, Teresita's house, to supposedly repair her television. So now, yes, he has means.
Yes, and it's putting him in the house.
It's putting him at the crime scene.
Yep.
So the police decide, because of what Remy and Joe had told them about the jewelry, they find out who his girlfriend is. They go talk to the girlfriend, and the girlfriend, to her credit, you know, agrees to let the family members and friends of Teresita see the jewelry, because the cops asked her, hey, have you received any jewelry from Alan lately? And she said, yes. In fact, I have. Can we see it? She even allowed, like I said, to her credit, she even allowed the friends and family of Teresita to look at the jewelry, and sure enough, some of it was hers. They identified some of it as being Teresita's. So Alan's pretty much screwed now, and he basically confesses, right? He confesses to the murder. He confesses that he went over there. A very dumb murder, baby. I mean, over a couple $100 worth of jewelry. You're going to kill someone? It's just mindless. But anyway, his story was he didn't intend to kill her. He just wanted to rob her, and I guess it went bad. I guess, you know, they got in a struggle or whatever, and he wound up stabbing her and killing her. So then he admitted that he threw the mattress over her body and lit it on fire, trying to hide the evidence. And then he ran away, basically. So, although he confessed during the court proceedings against Alan Showery,
All rise.
he pleaded not guilty, and he was sentenced to 14 years in prison, but he got out only serving, I think he was sentenced in like 1979 or 78, and he was released from prison in 81. He only served like 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
For a cold-blooded murder, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, pretty crazy, huh? Mm-hmm. So again, he might have surviving family, most likely he does. It was just back in the 70s, so...
Yeah.
So again, we're not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but I just thought that was very fascinating. Now, here's the thing. It's just same exact thing with Mary Heister from the last story. How could they possibly know that he gave the jewelry to the girlfriend?
Right.
when they didn't even know he had a girlfriend.
That's interesting.
It's crazy, huh?
Yeah, that is crazy.
Very, very crazy. I just think that's so fascinating that
What do the skeptics say about that?
I couldn't find really any arguments against this one because it was so... Well, how do you argue with that,
Yeah,
baby?
that's
How could they
interesting.
possibly know? And again, I don't know why Teresita's spirit or soul or whatever, I don't know why she specifically targeted Remy to visit, and then when Remy wasn't reacting to her, possessed her
Yeah.
to speak to her husband.
She was adamant about somebody knowing.
Yeah, she wanted somebody to know. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was. But I just think that's fascinating. And if you're gonna be all skeptical, well, and that's why it was unsolved. It was on Unsolved Mysteries because
Yeah.
it's a mystery. Because if you're gonna try to explain it away as, well, it's just them, they were suspicious and they were making things up. How would they know about the jewelry? How could they possibly know? I mean, unless Alan Showery's going around the hospital bragging about how he gave his girlfriend
Right.
her jewelry.
Right.
Or he was bragging about actually murdering her. They were like, let's make up the story. But that's not what happened. So I just thought that was a fascinating story. So what do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I was gonna ask a question.
Okay.
So, do you think that maybe these women couldn't rest in peace and they had to, they had to get that out? Like the first story, she probably knew of the other wife, you know what I mean? Or, I don't know, because what I believe where you go, maybe they couldn't rest in peace, and they had to get that answer out.
Yeah, I don't know if it's more and I think this is what you're asking me. If it's more motivated by vengeance or a need for justice.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
For closure,
Yeah,
for
for
the sake
closure.
of their families.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when you die mysteriously or you're murdered mysteriously and nobody knows who killed you, we watch all those crime shows,
Yeah,
baby.
it's
That
devastating.
for the families, they want to know who did it and they want justice.
Yeah.
So maybe that was I think that's more of a motivator to me than
Yeah,
vengeance.
closure. Yeah.
He's not going to get away with it. I'll get him. I don't think
Yeah.
that's it. I think it's more like they want that justice.
To heal the broken hearts of their loved ones that are still here.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only for them to pay for what they had done, but more for their own families' state of mind and
to have that healing.
that mental peace, that closure, Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So moving on, we come to our final story, baby.
Okay.
And this was a pretty famous one, and this occurred, this is called the Red Barn Murder in 1827 in Polstead, Suffolk, England. $1827, baby.
Wow.
Long time ago. So this is a pretty famous story, and of course a lot of people have come forward and tried to disprove it and stuff, but we're going to go over all that.
Okay.
The gist of the story is that there's this character named Bill Quarter, and he had basically been disowned by his family. His family was pretty wealthy, and his older brother, because the victim her name was Maria Martin, and Maria Martin had been dating the older brother and got pregnant by him, but that baby didn't survive. So a couple years go by, she meets someone else, has a child with him, and that child did survive. I believe her son's name was Thomas. So that by the time she meets this character, Bill Quarter, she had already, and got pregnant by him as well, she had already basically had 3 children out of wedlock. So she was trying to get him to marry her.
Yeah.
And apparently he didn't want anything to do with that. She was just a fling on the side, for him. As far as everybody knew, that's how he looked at her. But she apparently was completely in love with him.
Oh, wow.
So he continues to visit her at the farm. Now, and there's a lot of stuff going on, so I'm going to try to tell it to where it's not confusing. Maria Martin lived with her stepmother, Anne, and her father. Her biological mother had passed away, so her father had remarried a woman that was only a few years older than Maria, and her name was Anne. So it's her stepmother, and they're only a few years apart.
Yeah.
So he keeps coming to the house to see Maria, and she keeps trying to get him to marry her. He keeps coming up with excuses. But basically, his father passes away eventually, and both of his older brothers pass away as well, leaving him and his mother as the sole owners of that business or whatever. So basically, Bill is now coming into money.
Oh, okay.
You know, because there's no other heir. So I guess that prompted Maria to even push harder for him to marry her, you know. Now, at the time, she had a child with Bill, but it apparently didn't survive, which is just terrible.
Yeah.
And they made a big show of it, that they were going to take the baby and bury it in this big famous churchyard. I don't remember the name of it, but they made a big show of it.
Yeah.
And they came back, baby was gone. They were gone for like 2 days or something. They come back, and she's still trying to get him to marry her. So then Anne is a witness to Bill Corder showing up at the house and saying, okay, let's elope. Let's run away, you know.
Oh, okay.
We don't have a baby now. Now I'll marry you.
Oh, okay.
Meet me at the Red Barn, which was basically located on Bill Corder's property. From what I could tell, I couldn't get specifics because I don't think the barn is there anymore, of course. But I believe it was located on his property. So, you know, it's like a rendezvous. So you know, come meet me there, run away together, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So Maria's, of course, all excited. And she leaves. Weeks go by. And they're receiving letters, you know, Anne and her husband, Maria's father, they're receiving letters from Bill explaining how they're both doing well, but Anne's not feeling good because she got pregnant again, and that's why she can't come visit, and that's why she's not writing. Then he talks about how they're living on the Isle of Wight, so it's hard for them to send mail and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, months go by, so finally it's been so long since they heard from Maria that they start to get suspicious.
Yeah. They're getting worried.
Right. So it's almost a year. Almost a year goes by, and Anne has these horrible dreams of Maria appearing to her in the dreams, pulling her over to and calling her over to the Red Barn and pointing to a spot on the ground saying, he murdered me and he buried me here. You have to dig up my body. You have to let my father find my body. Right?
Yeah.
And get justice. You know, he murdered me. So Anne wakes up, tells her husband, look, this is what I dreamed. Can you go check it out? Tells him where to dig. Her dad, and I can't even imagine, baby, digging up my own daughter's remains, but that's what happened. He digs up, they found her wrapped in a, I think she was in a sack. I think he had put her in a bag or wrapped her in a blanket or something. But, of course, she's badly decomposed. It's been a year.
Yeah.
But Maria's biological sister was able to identify her because I guess she was missing a tooth in a certain spot and by what she was wearing. So they were able to identify her body. That is indeed her body. And how she died was that something struck her in the eye, in one of her eyes. So, of course, the police spring into action. He was Bill Corder, this clown, was easily found. They arrested him. Now, at this point in the story, we have to talk about this Bill Corder character because he was a real card, man, let me tell you. He was a well-known con man, liar, and a cheat. His nickname was Foxy because nobody trusted him.
So he's sly like a fox.
Yes, and remember, even his own family had pretty much disowned him because he had stolen from his father, he had stolen and lied to his brothers, all kinds of stuff. So they basically disowned him, wanted nothing to do with him. The only reason he was able to, you know, get access to his family's money is because everybody passed away but his mom, right?
Yeah.
So when they arrested him, he had started working and he had just gotten married to someone else, another young lady.
Oh, no.
And he was working, they basically opened the school for girls, for young girls. I don't remember what the school was for, but he was basically doing really well for himself, you know. But they snap him up, they grab him and they drag him down to jail and they start questioning him. Bill even hung out with, and I thought this was fascinating, he actually hung out with a well-known criminal named Beauty, was the nickname of this character. And Beauty basically got ratted out by Bill. So Bill, with the whole immunity thing, he didn't serve any time, but this guy went to prison. But he is quoted as saying, mark my words, that guy's he's going to hang one day. That's what he told the police about Bill Corder. That guy's going to hang one day, mark my words. And sure enough, his words were true. Within a year, Bill Corder hanged for murdering Maria Martin.
Oh, wow.
Now, here's the thing. He was very adamant because they said that the wound to her eye, to Maria, he was adamant that he didn't stab her because that's what they thought he did, that he had stabbed her with a knife or something in the eye. And he said no, that he shot her. Well, I mean, is that much better? You're going to shoot a woman in the face? Oh, man. What a horrible person.
He wanted that to be
He wanted to
correct.
He wanted to make sure she was dead. Yeah, he wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
I didn't stab her in the face. I just shot her with a gun in the face. Now, her son, Maria's son, remember Thomas?
Yeah.
He was like 10 or 11 at the time, I believe. Mm-hmm. He testified that Bill Corder had been seen around town showing off his brand new pistols, loaded pistols. Oh. And then he also testified that he saw Bill Corder walking around the Red Barn with a pickaxe.
Oh, wow.
Which is very suspicious.
Yeah.
What do you need a pickaxe in a barn for?
Yeah.
Maybe a pitchfork.
Yeah.
But a pickaxe? What are you digging? What are you digging in a barn? You know what I mean?
So the treasure?
The kid made a mental note of that. Well, that's odd. Why is he walking around with a pickaxe? And that's why the kid was able to.
Very observant kid.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, that's something odd to see, babe. Why is he walking around with a pickaxe around a barn? And basically, his green handkerchief was still around Maria's neck when they discovered the body.
Oh no.
Right. So he was just done. This guy's done. He was hung. He basically, at his hanging, right before they, executed him, he said, "I admit my guilt, and I deserve what I'm getting. I deserve this for what I have done." Those were basically his last words. So he got some of his dignity back there at the end, I think, but he was hung for this crime. Now, skeptics and historians have later brought forth the idea that Anne, the stepmother, since she was only a few years older than Maria, because Maria was 24 when she died, I think. Mm-hmm. Young woman,
Yeah.
Skeptics brought forward this theory that perhaps Bill Corder was messing around with her, Anne. And that Anne had made up the story of Maria's ghost because she found out that he had recently got remarried. Right?
Oh, and was jealous?
Jealous, right. Oh. I guess, and somehow she was involved in him helping murder Maria, because how else would she know where the body was buried?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Why didn't she go to jail then?
That's a good point. I agree. I completely think, I think that is it's a stretch.
Yeah.
Number one, it's a smear of her character, this Anne, the stepmother, because there's no evidence that she was messing around with this clown. She was married to a good man. She was married to a hardworking man. She had 3 children with him.
Yeah.
To assume that she's messing around with this Bill Corder guy,
right?
I think it's a smear against her character. But they don't care because they're trying to explain away the paranormal part of it. So I have a question. If that is the case, Bill Corder was a known weasel.
And a snitch.
He was a snitch. He was a rat. Mm-hmm. If Anne had anything to do with Maria's murder, especially since she was the one that, found the body.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he have ratted her out?
Exactly.
Why go up on the gallows and say, I deserve what I'm getting. I did this. I'm responsible. Why wouldn't he say, but she helped me, she helped me?
Because if he was such a weasel, like how he was to his own family, and then that beauty guy and stuff, he would have snitched on her.
You think he's going to show her loyalty when she was just a...
He doesn't have loyalty to anybody but himself.
Right. He was willing to murder poor Maria just because he wanted to move on.
Yeah.
Instead of just breaking it off with her.
Yeah.
But apparently, and this was his motive, Maria had intimate knowledge of his, let's say, more illegal activities. And she was kind of blackmailing him, which wasn't very wise on her part.
No, that's not.
Because by all accounts and purposes, baby, and I think we need to talk about this, because by all accounts and purposes, and things that I've read about Maria Martin, she was actually a very intelligent woman, young woman. She could read and write extremely well because she worked for a clergyman watching their children, and they had taught her how to read and write, which was very rare for a country girl back then in the 1800s to be educated, and she was. So she was reading, she was, so she was a smart girl. I guess she just had very poor taste.
Yeah, poor taste in men.
In men, yeah, because that's what got her killed,
Yeah.
And he shot her in the face, baby. Oh, just terrible. But
doesn't that sound like a angry murder?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he was tired of her.
Yeah.
He wanted to get rid of her.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Because they said, how else would Anne know where she was buried? Well, Anne would have had to have been there, baby.
Yeah.
When he murdered her. So here's another question. If you're still one of these people that supports this idea that Anne helped him murder her, and him being a weasel and not fingering her wasn't enough evidence, the other question is if Anne was willing to murder her own stepdaughter to be with this clown, why did she wait a whole year?
Right.
Why wait an entire year? I mean, if you're killing her off to be with him...
Right, go be with him.
You're going to go be with him.
Yeah.
Within
leave
weeks,
your husband,
months.
Leave your kids and go.
Right. I mean, you could argue, well, she was just given enough time so that it wasn't suspicious. Maria vanished.
Yeah.
Nobody knew she was dead. Yeah. She vanished.
Yeah, no letters.
The letters. Yeah. Right. So she could have went and, ran off with Bill if she was involved with him like these, skeptics are saying.
Yeah.
I completely disregard that because, again, why did she wait a whole year?
Right.
Because apparently right around the time that he had married this other young woman, that's when Anne came forward with her stories, and that's what got him all suspicious. Oh, well, see, she found out he married somebody else, so that's why she, took this.
Yeah, but you can also say, on the other hand, if you believe in the paranormal, you could say that Maria came back on the anniversary of her death to give that closure to her father and her family.
It wasn't an exact year, but it was within a year. Yeah. But maybe Maria was jealous.
Yeah, maybe.
That he had remarried and she saw him happy. Yeah. She came, that's why she came back. I was just going to
say the same thing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's...
unfinished business.
That's the Red Barn murders.
Interesting.
Why do I keep saying murders?
I don't know.
The Red Barn murder. Yep. So what do you think of that one?
That's sad.
Very sad, huh?
They're all three sad stories.
Yeah.
I mean, they're interesting stories. I mean, I didn't mean to say that was a good story. They're sad stories, these poor people. But I guess they did get closure for their family and loved ones, so that's good.
So there's not going to be any conclusions,
right?
Really, because we're pretty much done. And, if there were any doubts or any people trying to explain away the paranormal aspects to these documented cases, we pretty much refuted them. But we're not trying to persuade anybody.
No.
If you want to believe whatever, Anne was a horrible person and murdered her own stepdaughter, hey, that's on you. What do you think about this whole thing, though, baby?
I one of the things I think of is, like, especially when you were saying in a couple of the stories that the ghost would come to the person numerous times. It makes me wonder how many people have ignored that and the murders never got solved, like never got justice.
Oh, that is
or closure for their loved ones. You know what I mean?
Very fascinating point, baby. That is a very good point. Yeah.
Because you know how, like, you have a dream, and then as soon as you have a great dream, and then you wake up, and then within like 10 minutes of your day you start getting ready for your day, and then you forget your dream. But if they came back for numerous times and and you kept ignoring it, that's a shame.
That's a shame to think that somebody could have got away with murder
Yeah.
because people are too frightened or too skeptical and explain their dreams away as exactly
Yeah.
that, just dreams.
Yeah, it must have been my imagination.
I'm just upset. I'm grieving.
I just
so
miss that person.
That's why this person is visiting me in my dreams, telling me, hey, I was murdered. You have to do something about it. Oh, what a horrible dream. And they just move on. And that person that murdered their loved one got away with murder. Yeah, wow. That's a really good point, baby.
Yeah.
So anyway, that pretty much does it.
Okay.
So thank you for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed the show, please take the time to rate us, give us a review. Remember, reviews that we get move us up the algorithms and make our show more visible to new listeners. If you have a story to send us, doesn't matter if it's ghost stories, local folklore, urban legends in your area, anything like that, we're fascinated by it. Police officer stories, truck driver stories, all this kind of stuff. Anything you want to send us. If your story is too long to type out in an email, on your phone, you can go online, free digital recording apps, record your voice on your phone, and just email it to us digitally, and we will either play it directly on the show, or if you want to be anonymous, we'll just tell your story in our own words and make it cool.
Yes. And thank you for sending the emails. Thank you for posting questions and stuff on Facebook. We appreciate the input. And keep on listening. Thank you for listening. And as always, have a good night. Goodbye.